Once you understand what the origin of the disease is or the disorder, then it becomes extremely clear how you can effectively manage cancer without toxicity. You just have to pull the plug on the two fuels that drive the fermentation metabolism while transitioning the entire body over to fatty acids and ketones that the tumor cells cannot use for fuel.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Pakulski. Today's podcast is everything about cancer. If you or anyone you know has ever experienced cancer or suffered through cancer, you're going to want to pay attention, listen to this podcast, grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, take some notes, because this is an absolute game changer. A man who has led the way in cancer research for a number of years now, Thomas Seyfried, Dr. Thomas Seyfried joins me today, and we really uncover the metabolic truth of cancer as a metabolic disease, not certainly a genetic disease, and one that seems to be absolutely preventable, absolutely treatable, and something that I hope we can all across the board in the future. Dr. Thomas Seyfried is a professor at Boston College. He's been doing this for over 30 years. He's studied all the way back to Otto Warburg, through Hans Krebs, all these just icons in the science world when it comes to metabolism and understanding metabolism. And his lab has recently discovered the two pathways that are driving cancer, ultimately the fermentation process that we need to prevent. And we're going to describe that and ultimately how to overcome it in this podcast. Ladies and gents, thanks for being here. I always appreciate you being a listener of the Muscle Intelligence Podcast, being a part of our amazing community. Listeners to this podcast are certainly people who want to pursue personal excellence, personal performance, and ultimately get the most out of every single day. I often talk about an optimized daily experience as being the objective. What should I be doing from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed? And this is something you may want to consider adding to your yearly repertoire, certainly a ketogenic approach to optimization of life. And Dr. Thomas Seyfried is going to tell us about that and so much more. Today's podcast is brought to you by our friends at Bioptimizers, yet again, coming back at you with an incredible offer. Mag Breakthrough. For the longest period of time, this product has been in my medicine cabinet, in my vitamin drawer, and it's something I just take every day. I give it to my kids now every day because I think magnesium is just so depleted in our food supply. If you're at all stressed, if you're at all training hard, magnesium is going to be something you're going to want to add in. The thing I love about Mag Breakthrough is that it's got 7 different chelates. So I can get all these different types of magnesium or all these different types of absorption rates, and they tend to work or affect different tissues in different ways. And I really like that. And some work for some people and some work for others. And with 7 different chelates, you're going to get full coverage of magnesium to be fully optimized. So shout out to Bioptimizers. That's BIOPTIMIZERS.com, bioptimizers.com/muscle intelligence, or just go to bioptimizers.com, use the code muscle10 for their entire product line, which now is just so extensive. Everything from their new amazing Newtopia products, Mag Breakthrough, and everyone should be taking Masszymes as well. Capex is a product we absolutely love. They've got some incredible collagen products as well. Ladies and gents, enjoy this podcast. And when you're done, head over to bioptimizers.com and check out our amazing show sponsors. Dr. Tom Seyfried, thank you very much for joining me, sir. As I mentioned just before recording, I'm a massive fan of your work and look forward to digging into understanding cancer as a metabolic disease.
Well, thank you very much, Ben. It's nice to be here.
I appreciate you making the time. I'm sure many of my listeners may have heard you on Peter Attia's podcast, as well as many other places where your information is present. I think it's incredibly powerful what you're doing. I think the world needs to understand more about the metabolic implications of health, as well as the metabolic implications of cancer in general. And it seems like your study and your evolution of understanding of cancer as metabolic diseases has actually evolved a lot in the last few years, certainly since the first time you were on Peter's podcast, which I think was 2018. So I'd love to maybe have you give a bit of a background into how you got into understanding cancer, which you did on his podcast, and then we could shift into some deeper conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ben. I've been here at BC for almost 35 years. And before that, I was at Yale University in New Haven for 9 years. So, but I didn't really get into cancer as a metabolic disease until around the year 2000. Most of the time I was doing basic biochemistry of epilepsy, brain development, and cancer, but not in the context of knowing about its origin or trying to manage it. We had done a lot of work in the field of epilepsy. I was head of the ketogenic diet special interest group for epilepsy, where ketogenic diets have been used to manage epilepsy since the 1920s by Wilder at the Mayo Clinic. And it was only because water-only fasting would reduce epileptic seizures, and you could only do that for a certain period of time before the patient would expire from starvation. Mm-hmm. So he developed a diet that would cause blood work to change in the way water-only fasting would do that. And lo and behold, many of the epileptic seizures disappeared or were managed to become far fewer in incidence. But, we had been doing analysis of angiogenesis and cancer and calorie restriction, and looking at calorie restrictions, reducing of angiogenesis, which is abnormal vasculature of tumors. But then we started to find out that what is calorie restriction or water-only fasting was having a tremendous effect on these tumors in the mice. And at the same time, we were doing ketogenic diets and calorie restriction for epilepsy. So we had the best animal models for both epileptic seizures as well as various models for brain cancer, and which we developed here at Boston College, first at Yale University and then at Boston College, to do mostly biochemistry work on these things. But then we started to get into the management phase of looking at what's going on. How is it possible that calorie restriction in the mouse, which is comparable to water-only fasting in the human, was having such a profound effect on reducing blood vessels, killing the tumor cells, reducing inflammation, doing all these different kinds of things. And at the same time, in a completely different model, was managing epileptic seizures in mice that had seizures. Now, we never really figured out how these diets were managing epileptic seizures. We only knew one thing that was very interesting in both children, and the epileptic mice. That is, if you maintain low, steady blood sugar, it seemed like the seizures would be managed.
If you want to learn how to implement the ketogenic diet and the Press Pulse protocol into your cancer management, just visit school.com/keto for cancer, the new community by our research analyst Johnny Rockermeyer. Within this new community platform, you can connect with other patients and learn from their experiences. You can also just search through the posts other members have already made. You will have access to our classroom section as well, which provides practical advice and tools for the best results. These sections cover all parts of the Press Pulse protocol that you should implement. Starting with the general scientific concepts by Dr. Thomas Seyfried, we will show you how to start the ketogenic diet, including which foods to choose and which to avoid. Additionally, we prepared a list of doctors specialized in metabolic therapy, as well as details about glutamine inhibition and hyperbaric oxygen protocols. So, take a look around at school.com/keto for cancer.
Even the ketones, even if they were up, they didn't always have to be at the same level. They just had to be elevated. But it seemed like, and then every now and then a kid that was managed with seizures for long periods of time would take a bite of a cookie or a juice, and within a few minutes explode into a violent seizure. So, and the blood sugar would spike the moment the sugar elevated, the seizure appeared in many of the cases, or within a half an hour of the spike. It was very quick onset, despite the fact that the seizures had been managed for such a long period of time. And we also knew that any child that liked large amounts of ketogenic diet, they're very rare that you find anybody who likes this stuff. But every now and then you got a kid that liked it, and they were unable, those children were unable to manage their epileptic seizures because they ate so much fat, their blood sugars couldn't go down. It was linked to insulin insensitivity. And we found the exact same thing in the mouse as well. So when we shifted over more to the metabolic management of cancer, we had a vast knowledge base of diet work for epilepsy. And we knew about ketogenic diets for epilepsy. We knew about calorie restriction. So then when we started to look at the outcome of cancer in the brain or in other areas, we could then follow biomarker changes in the body with changes in the tumor, how big it was, how far it metastasized, and these kinds of things. So we that's how we got into it. And then gradually it became clear that I was trained as a biochemical geneticist at the University of Illinois. So I did a lot of mouse genetics in my career. And of course, everyone had been indoctrinated into the worldview that cancer was a genetic disease. But when I saw the changes in metabolism and changing glucose and ketones and how powerful it was in managing cancer, the growth of these tumor cells, and in both humans and in mice, I began to question the whole concept of what the National Cancer Institute and the world pretty much think what cancer is. And then it became clear to me that these genes are all downstream effects, these gene mutations of effects of a disturbed energy metabolism. So it's the disturbed energy metabolism that actually causes the genetic abnormalities, making the entire cancer industry and field seriously questioned, because most of their new therapies, the way they treat patients and these kinds of things, are based on the dogmatic view that cancer is a genetic disease. And I did some studies with nuclear transfer, mitochondrial transfer experiments, reviewing these kinds of studies that completely undermines this whole view that cancer is a genetic disease. So once you make up your mind that this is not a genetic disease, and then you begin to look at all the kinds of treatments that people are given for cancer management, like the immunotherapies and radiation, chemo, and all this kind of stuff, it's all based on the somatic mutation theory of cancer, which is flawed. It's no longer a credible explanation for the disease. It's clearly a metabolic disease, as Otto Warburg originally said. Warburg clearly argued in the 1920s and 30s that cancer was a metabolic type disease. And we have solidified what Warburg said and then took it one greater step forward and showed that what the actual fuels are that are fermented to generate energy within the tumor cell. So now it becomes clear how to manage cancer. Once you understand what the origin of the disease is or the disorder, then it becomes extremely clear how you can effectively manage cancer without toxicity. You just have to pull the plug on the two fuels that drive the fermentation metabolism while transitioning the entire body over to fatty acids and ketones that the tumor cells cannot use for fuel. So you simply marginalize their existence in the body and slowly degrade them. And you can do that with a variety of different approaches that we're currently investigating here in the lab, dosage, timing, and scheduling. So it's a long process. You don't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to overturn the entire cancer industry. It pretty much comes gradually as you read other papers and you do the experiments yourself in the lab, and things become more and more clear as to what's actually going on.
So coming back here for a sec, Tom. So just to summarize and make sure I'm accurate on something you said there, it sounds like while a low carbohydrate restricted diet is an important, or no carbohydrate diet is an important piece, it also must be in a caloric deficit, because these children are overeating on the fats that cause the insulin resistance to kick in.
In children, you have to be very, very careful because they're at a growth. They're growing. And it becomes care. That's why our dietitians and nutritionists that work in the epilepsy field, like Beth Zupek-Kinya, Helen Cross, and a variety of others, when you work with kids, you have to balance the nutritional capabilities of the diet with the ability of the diet to maintain seizure control. So it's not as simple as you think. You really, and the kids, of course, the parents are in control of the child's diet and health. So they're walking the fine line of not disturbing normal development while at the same time trying to prevent breakthrough seizures. So again, if you're too aggressive, you could undermine the nutritional capabilities of the diet. So you have to be very careful. You don't want to cause growth retardation. You don't want to lead to adverse effects. So it's a balancing act, a nutritional, a micro and macronutrient balancing act for kids. Adults have a lot. You can do a lot more. You're not worried about the growth issues any longer. You're just worried about maintaining seizure control. Now,
Right.
the adults, they would prefer drugs than ketogenic diets. They have free will now. They're not controlled by their parents any longer. So if there's a drug that could manage an epileptic seizure, they prefer to take that than do the diet. But I know many adults who do a combination of both.
As far as the follow-up question to that does it seem as though that a ketogenic diet is effective for all types of cancer at all stages, or is it specific cancers that tend to be resistant to it?
Well, what we're finding now, it's almost the diet, as long as it's a nutritious diet, it doesn't really make any difference what you eat. We developed the glucose ketone index calculator, which pretty much says that if you could get your glucose ketone ratio in the blood down to 2.0 or below, it serves as a powerful inhibitor of cancer growth. So if a person can do that on a vegan diet, a carnivore diet, a pescatarian diet, a ketogenic diet, a Mediterranean diet, doesn't make any difference. We use ketogenic diets are simply maybe a little bit easier to do it that way, but not to say that a vegan diet. Vegan diets are harder to do it. It's more difficult. It takes longer because there's more carbs in plants than there is in animal protein.
Yeah,
But
can
I
you
don't care.
describe that ratio exactly? So I just want to understand that.
Yeah, so it's the ratio of blood glucose in millimolar to blood ketones in millimolar. The meter, the Keto Mojo meter. Dominic uses this all the time. Dominic is constantly in. Dominic is somebody that's in constant ketosis. He's always measuring his ratios. But you can get it from Amazon, the glucose ketone index monitor from Keto Mojo, and you have to take you stick your finger to get a drop of blood, and with one strip it'll tell you what the glucose level is, and with another strip it'll tell you what the ketone level is, and it's simply the ratio of glucose to ketones. And if you can get 1.0 or below, meaning that the ratio of glucose to ketones in the blood is equal, or that ketones are actually higher than glucose, then the tumor cells, if you are someone with cancer, then the tumor cells are struggling for their existence under those conditions. They absolutely need the glucose as a fuel, and they can't burn or use ketones or fatty acids as a fuel. So when you take these diets in, you look at your blood work, and you see what your ratio of blood glucose to ketone is. And generally what we see in the cancer is that once the patient, and I don't do this, I'm not a physician, so I don't treat any patients, but my physician colleagues do. And what we see is that once the patient can be into a GKI ratio of 2.0 or below, then we add on some additional drugs and procedures that will target glutamine, the other fuel that's used as a fermentable fuel. You have to do that very carefully because glutamine is an important amino acid. Hyperbaric oxygen now becomes a procedure. So we developed a press pulse concept for managing cancer that incorporates all of the things that I'm saying. We published the framework of it, giving physicians a clear conceptual idea of the method that you would use to manage cancer. And now we're fleshing it out with a very detailed, comprehensive treatment protocol that we have yet to publish. But we're working on that. But the framework for press pulse metabolic therapy, you can press glucose down very, very low without harming the body, as long as the body can burn ketones, which is an evolutionary adaptation to low blood sugar. But the cancer cells absolutely need the glucose, where the body can switch from glucose to ketones. So they don't need the glucose as importantly as the cancer does, the cancer cells do. So once they're in that zone, then you can start chipping away at them, at their glutamine, and hyperbaric oxygen now causes oxidative stress and starts killing cancer cells using oxidative. that could replace radiation therapy as an alternative. Radiation kills cancer by oxidative stress, but it also damages local tissues, whereas hyperbaric oxygen will strike only the cancer cells, enhancing the health of the normal tissue as long as the patient is in a state of therapeutic ketosis.
So I'd love to hear more about this glutamine pathway. So obviously not consuming dietary glutamine may lead us to reducing dietary protein. Is that a belief?
I don't know.
Because Dom tends to move a lot.
We're testing that right now. The glutamine issue is very interesting. The cancer cells need the glutamine, but so does your normal immune system, your gut, urea cycle. It's a very essential amino acid for so many physiological properties. But that's why we pulse it. We take drugs that can target glutamine utilization, but we use them very strategically and for a short period of time.
What drug is that, Tom?
Well, right now we're using 6-deoxynorlucine DON. It's not approved. It was used in little kids with leukemias, and it was used for a variety of other cancer patients in phase 2 trials, but they said it was too toxic. And the problem is they gave it in too high of a dose without knowing that you could massively enhance the therapeutic potential if the patient is in a state of therapeutic ketosis. Consequently, the dosages that you need are now much, much lower. So the toxicity now issue becomes a non-issue. So again, without knowing how to use the tools that are available and understanding the biology and biochemistry of the problem, you can be throwing out very important drugs that when used in a different context can have superpower. And as a matter of fact, we just found out that for another drug, devimistat, which is a drug that was used for human pancreatic cancer. And I think it's still in some trials, but the results have been not good. The patients did not respond really well, and they're reconsidering whether this is going to be a valuable drug. Well, we took that drug, devimistat, and we have a model for pediatric high-grade glioma for children. We tested the drug by itself on our preclinical model for pediatric high-grade glioma, and like they found in the humans for pancreatic cancer, it didn't do anything. However, when we used a calorie-restricted ketogenic diet with devimistat, it was unbelievably powerful. And we use far lower dosaging. The dosages now could be reduced to very, very minimal dosages. What happens is the ketogenic diet acts as a facilitator to facilitate the delivery of drugs to target, which is really remarkable. So not only does it lower the blood sugar, it acts as a facilitator of drug delivery to the target. Therefore, you don't need nearly as much drug, and the drug that gets to the target is super powerful.
Can you talk about that a little bit? I'm curious how that is, or do you know mechanistically what's going on?
Well, for brain, we've shown for 2 small molecules, and it seems to facilitate delivery through the blood-brain barrier of small molecules. The exact mechanism by which that happens is not known. I had a grant to look into this, but for whatever reason, it wasn't approved. But what we do know is when we look at the brain of mice that have had these drug treatments in the presence or absence of ketogenic diets, we find 3-fold more drug on target when the drug is in the brain on the tumor when administered with the ketogenic diet. So clearly, it's facilitating delivery of small molecules through the blood-brain barrier. We could figure out later on what the mechanism would be, but the effect is clearly obvious and documented. So this then becomes a real important way to deliver small molecules, I think, to children and adults. In fact, in adults, we've done it in both pediatric and adults. A way to kill cancer cells, again, very powerful with minimal toxicity. Again, the whole thing for managing cancer is you want to annihilate the tumor cells gradually without causing any harm to any normal cells or tissues in the body. And we can do this. This is what the future will be.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties in my next question. So my question was targeting specific cancer cells without doing damage to healthy cells. And I think it ties back to your mention of Otto Warburg. And I'd love to have you talk about what the Warburg effect is, and ultimately what was he studying 100 years ago? I think our audience would know something about it, but not an enormous amount.
Yeah, well, Sam Apple, a New York Times, he wrote the book Ravenous, The History of Otto Warburg. I have his biography by Hans Krebs, Otto Warburg, Hans Krebs of the Krebs cycle.
Yeah.
You know, he was a postdoctoral associate with Otto Warburg.
Wow.
I worked closely with Richard Veitch, the late Richard Veitch. He passed away a couple of years ago. Veitch and I would speak all about this constantly. Veitch was Hans Krebs's last student. So I had an opportunity to speak with Veitch. And of course, Krebs knew Warburg real well. And so I had this kind of a train of connection between Warburg, Krebs to Veitch to me. But I read Warburg's work very, very carefully. I looked at many of his papers. I replicated much of what he has found. His argument was that all cancer cells are initiated by a shift in energy metabolism from using oxygen to using energy without oxygen. And energy without oxygen is fermentation. If you jog or if you sprint or swim fast or whatever, your muscles will burn energy faster than the oxygen can relieve the lactic acid deficit. So we are all of our bodies contain the glycolytic pathway where, like for example, in an epileptic seizure, the blood fills up with lactic acid. Brain throws out tremendous lactic acid because sometimes the person stops breathing during the epileptic seizure, and you get tremendous lactic acid buildup. But this is only temporary. As soon as oxygen comes back into the system, the systems are restored to using oxygen, oxidative phosphorylation, energy through oxygen. During a heart attacks, we stop breathing. The heart stops pumping blood, and you see tremendous lactic acid. And the other product of the glutaminolysis pathway, the glutamine waste product, is succinic acid. Mm-hmm. So you see lactic acid and succinic acid build up in the bloodstream very rapidly. During brief heart, obviously, these are heart attacks that would be where function would be restored. So we see that those are the waste products of fermentation, but they provide tremendous quick energy, but it cannot be sustained. It's not a non-sustainable. You can only do this for a short period of time in normal cells. The cancer cell does this as a constant, permanent, locked-in fermentation. So, and that didn't happen overnight. It took long periods of time, as Warburg said, long period of time to replace oxidative phosphorylation with substrate-level phosphorylation, which is energy without oxygen. Right. So the cancer cells and every major cancer that we have looked at are all fermenters. Lung cancer, colon cancer, bladder cancer, breast cancer, they're all similar. They all ferment. So that means they're all the same, very similar. You can use the same strategy to kill cancer no matter what organ or what tissue it happens to be in. We have found, I did massive studies looking for any cancer cell that would have a normal structure and function of the mitochondria, and I have found none. None of the major cancers that we know of has normal function of mitochondria. That means they're getting their energy from fermentation. What does that mean? They ferment, they get energy without oxygen, right? This is what Warburg showed. He showed that a rat that would have a tumor, if you gave the rat cyanide blocks OXPHOS instantly. That's why, the James Jones, they drank the Kool-Aid and they all died very rapidly from the cyanide. But you can give a tumor-bearing rat cyanide, it kills the rat instantly, but the tumor cells are unaffected by the cyanide. And we did the same thing in our lab here. We showed these tumor cells live without oxygen. They can live in cyanide. So how are they living without oxygen? They're fermenting. That means energy without oxygen. And then we interrogated all of the different fuels to figure out what are the fuels that drive the fermentation. And the two fuels are the sugar glucose and the amino acid glutamate. None of the other amino acids, or sugars can do this. And you have to have two things. You have to have an ability to use these fuels, and you have to have a logistic issue, which is the abundance of the fuel in the microenvironment. So yes, the cancer cell can ferment a little bit of some asparagine or one of these others. The problem is there's none of that around. And in order to drive the beast, you have to have a sufficient level of fuel when oxygen is not there. And the most abundant fuels massively are glucose and glutamine. So those are the two fuels that are driving the majority of cancers. So they can't we have not found any cancer cell that can replace glucose and glutamine with fatty acids or ketone bodies.
Right.
So it becomes very clear how to manage cancer.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. Again, this may be a shot in the dark, but that the initiation of the cancer cell happens in a part of the body where oxygen is not properly being delivered to that part of the body. Is that something that's been studied? And I'm curious, does that make sense?
Absolutely. Warburg showed that intermittent hypoxia will chronically damage oxidative phosphorylation. There's two things that have to happen. Number one, the damage must be chronic. It cannot be acute. Acute damage, like cyanide, kills the cell. You can never get a cancer cell from a dead cell. Number two, the cell has to be able to adapt and transition to fermentation metabolism itself. So we have some cells in our body that rarely, if ever, form cancer. Neurons of the brain, cardiac myocytes, these kinds of cells cannot survive on fermentation metabolism. So you rarely, if ever, find tumors from brain neurons or from cardiac myocytes because they do not have the capacity or capability to survive under prolonged fermentation. They die. So you have to have cells that have the capability of slow adaptation from an oxygen-driven metabolism to a fermentation-driven metabolism. And those are most of the organs in our body. So lung can do this, liver can do this, breast can do this, colon can do this. All of these cells have the capacity to shift from oxphos to fermentation, whereas neurons of the brain, cardiac myocytes, and even some skeletal muscles, that they can't form. So when you hear sarcoma, it means a muscle cancer, but it's actually the sheaths around the muscle. It's not the striated muscle cells themselves. So again, this is the process. So once you understand this, then you have a clear path for management because you really know what their weakness is. You really know how to shift the body's energy metabolism away from carbohydrates into fats and ketone bodies, making the cancer cells vulnerable. And then you come in with low-dose drugs that become highly strategic and powerful when administered under the right condition. And the results that we're getting in both the preclinical models, dogs, humans that do this, is unbelievable. So it's the future. It's just going to take time for the establishment to recognize, and the people themselves to recognize that this cancer, most of these aggressive cancers can in fact be manageable. And I don't like the term terminal cancer. Who says it's terminal? Did you try metabolic therapy on this? I can't tell you how many stage 4 cancer patients are out there for a variety of different tissues, and they're still alive. Are they due to viral infections? You can give papillomavirus, hepatitis C. They will damage mitochondria. Intermittent hypoxia, sleep apnea, chronic inflammation. One has to be careful. Over-exercising or taking all kinds of supplements and things. You have to be always cognizant of the influence on what we call general metabolic homeostasis. But I would say in general, those who are fit, eat right, exercise, their risk of cancer is generally far, far less than those folks that are morbidly obese and have a number of other risk factors like type 2 diabetes and these kinds of things. So there's a clear relationship between these physiological states.
So it sounds like you've mentioned general metabolic homeostasis. It sounds like if there's a shift in either direction, that can potentially be.
I don't know precisely about that. All I know is that if you can keep your mitochondria healthy by whatever diet and lifestyle you have, the probability of getting cancer is extremely rare. How do we know this? We know this by looking at the health status of folks on the planet, Aboriginal tribes who follow their traditional diet and lifestyle. And that was clearly documented by the humanitarian physician Albert Schweitzer when he evaluated these various African tribes that lived according to their traditional ways And I think he had 40,000 evaluations and not one case of cancer. Clearly, these kinds of tribes, and this is known for the Aboriginals of Australia, this is known for the rainforest people, and this was known for the Eskimo, or I should say the Inuits, these folks. Cancer was extremely rare in traditional groups of people. It's very hard to get cancer. I mean, you really have to abuse the hell out of your body to get cancer. But, you know, we evolved for hundreds of thousands of years in a Paleolithic diet lifestyle where carbs were not high carbohydrate, poorly processed or processed foods, high carbohydrate processed foods did not exist in our environment for hundreds of thousands of years. We were a gathering. We had plenty of exercise. You're always looking for something to eat. You can go back and read the Paleolithic literature on how we as a species survived. The Neolithic period, we began to cultivate grains, which obviously led to the formation of civilizations around of food sources, rice and corn and wheat, and this kind of thing. But then within the last 80 or 90 years or less even, we started to develop highly processed foods that are packaged that have long shelf lives. I use a Twinkie here. I bought these Twinkies 10 years ago, and they're still in the package. And when I show them to the students, they look like they're ready to eat. You know, this is not natural. This kind of stuff where you have all these chemicals in the product. This puts your body at risk for damage. It's a diet and lifestyle issue for this cancer. Cancer is a diet lifestyle issue. So we are in this civilized world now. We have fast foods on every corner in many of the cities. People are sitting in traffic, ingesting toxic air, sitting in front of a computer. They're not getting the level of exercise, the nutritious foods, or that we had during the Paleolithic period. So I think awareness simply becomes what we need to do. And as I said, we have an obesity epidemic. If people were really concerned about preventing cancer and were frightened of, we would not have an obesity epidemic. So these things so it's up to individuals' knowledge. They should know what they need to do to reduce their risk.
Yeah, and Tom, talk to me about these young humans, these kids who are having like glioblastoma and brain cancers. So it's obviously not their lifestyle that's leading to that. What would kind of pull the trigger on that?
Well, you know, as I said, a lot of people were asking me about that, and developmental abnormalities. We know because every tumor that we've looked at, whether in the child or in the adult, has the same metabolic readout. They're fermenters. So how did their mitochondria become damaged or corrupted during some developmental process? What was it? A chemical carcinogen? What was the exposure? The answer is we don't know. The only thing we can know is that when the tumor develops, its biochemistry is very similar to that of the tumor in the adult.
When we started the conversation, you said that you measure some markers of metabolic function, metabolic health. Can you talk a little bit about those, like what you guys are measuring to determine where somebody sits in this continuum? Yeah,
I think, when we do a blood work analysis, and my colleagues that are treating cancer as a metabolic disease, the first thing we look at is the blood, and we do a comprehensive analysis of the blood. What's the triglyceride level? Triglycerides are indicative. Low triglycerides are good. High triglycerides put you at risk for cardiovascular disease. A lot of folks have parasite infections. The HDL, LDL ratios are off. A lot of the blood markers are off. And you say to yourself, well, they got type 2 diabetes. Their insulin level is, they have problems with insulin. They have problems with glucose. They have a high blood pressure, hypertension. They have a lot of different things that you can pick up with blood markers. So they're already out of metabolic homeostasis. So the question is how you bring them back. And the answer is what we try to do. And again, I don't want to say it's a blanket approach for everyone. And again, I don't do any of this, but my colleagues do. And we're writing the treatment protocol so the physicians actually have a handle on the whole thing. We try to get them to stop eating carbohydrates for as long as we can, like 10 days to 14 days. All of a sudden, they start getting into the glucose ketone index zone, And you start to see all the markers coming back online. If they have parasites, you can give them an anti-parasitic. As a matter of fact, one of the anti-parasitics, M-bendazole, a worm parasite drug, also targets the metabolism in the tumor cells. So the parasite and the cancer cell use a common form of energy. And when it's unbelievable, the parasite drug. Now, and what really kills me and gets me very, very upset is that in India, you can buy this M-bendazole for about 50 cents a tablet. And as soon as the industry realized it was useful for managing cancer, in the United States, they make it now $350 a tablet for the same. This is what we do. I call it Scarelli the drugs, which means, remember Martin Scarelli? He was the most hated man in America. He jacked the prices of everything up. Everybody got really angry with him. Well, the industry does many of the same kinds of things. As soon as a drug is realized to have some therapeutic benefit against cancer, it's already, the price is jacked up to exorbitant levels. This is in my mind, this is immoral to do something like this. So, but anyway, we're learning more and more about various kinds of drugs that by themselves may not have the full power, but when you put the package together with the diet, lifestyle drug combos, you start to see tremendous therapeutic benefit where cancer cells can be gradually eliminated without causing minimal, if any, toxicity to the rest of the body. As a matter of fact, the patients who come out of the press pulse therapeutic strategy, so the patient comes into the clinic, as I said, he has many comorbidities besides cancer. So the idea is get a grab hold of it, bring him back to some state. Then we do the pulse dosage timing and scheduling, and then we gradually hammer away at the patient. Interestingly enough, diabetes goes away, hypertension goes away, high blood pressure goes away, and the cancer becomes managed. So the person emerges from metabolic therapy a hell of a lot healthier than they were before they entered into this. So this is unbelievable. This is the way it's going to happen.
How long?
If people want this will be what they can get.
How long is that typical intervention? Someone comes into your clinic or to work with the physicians you're working with, and what is the typical protocol duration? It's very
individual. Some people have to bite the bullet for a year or two. Others seem to respond really, really fast. So again, it's a very individual thing. How motivated is the patient? How compliant is the patient? A lot of this falls on the shoulders of the patient.
Yeah.
So the patient has the readouts. Like if you look at our paper that we published on Pablo Kelly from Devon, England, who was diagnosed with a glioblastoma, and he was given only 9 months to live. He didn't want any radiation, no chemo, no radiation, no steroids, no surgery, nothing. So he just took the metabolic therapy, and everybody said he was crazy, and he did all this. So the tumor grew very, very slowly, and after 3 years, he had it surgically debulked. And they said, it was at first it was an inoperable tumor. And then after 3 years of metabolic therapy, it became operable. So he had most of it taken out. And, he had, I have 5 years of daily glucose ketone index measurement. So the paper shows every person in the world that looks at what Pablo did, look at what he did every single day. We have the dates, the time when he took, when he measured his blood glucose and ketones. And then, but now Pablo is 9-year survivor. The glioblastoma is still there. Is Pablo? The answer is no. Is Pablo alive? The answer is yes. Is his quality of life good? Absolutely. He has an occasional seizure, but he gets along with himself. He has a family now that he didn't have. He's got 2 kids so I mean, how long will Pablo live? We have no idea, but he's alive now far longer than he was ever expected to live. So the answer to your question, Ben, is we don't know, because a lot of these folks are still in the pipeline. They're still surviving. They have a good quality of life. They're living far longer than they were expected to live. And they're all considered terminal stage 4 kinds of cancers. We've seen it with breast. We've seen it with colon. We've seen it with liver. We've seen it with all these different kinds of cancers. So people say, well, why are there no clinical trials if this is so important? And the question is, who's going to pay for the clinical trial, right? A company that would realize that none of the drugs they're pushing are really important, and we're going to right? Think about it. Doesn't make any sense, right? Totally makes sense. So, and the other thing too is who's trained to do this? And the answer is not many physicians even know about what I just said. You know, the Mayo Clinic physicians think glucose has no role. One of the people with cancer emailed me and said he went to the Mayo Clinic and the person said glucose had nothing to do with cancer. And I said, what are these people living under a rock? I mean, other people have published so many papers showing that there's a direct relationship between how fast your cancer grows and the level of sugar in your blood, glucose. Yeah. So, I mean, this is common knowledge to those of us who know about energy metabolism.
Sure. Is there a camp opposing your view on cancer right now? So is there a camp saying that glucose doesn't matter or the research you guys are saying is ineffective?
No, there's no camp because the scientific evidence is overwhelming. Yeah. The problem is that the folks that say glucose has nothing to do with cancer know zero about the biology of the disease they're treating. Yeah. And this is another scary point that I feel that's a tragedy of monumental proportions, that many, I don't know about most, but certainly far many more than there should be, are clueless about the biology of the disease they're treating patients with. They never heard. What I just said to you is unknown. And the other thing is they become extremely, unfortunately, defensive. They say, well, if it were so important, I would have heard about it. Well, who's going to go spread the word that cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disease? Because if you go to the NCI website, the first thing they see about cancer is a genetic disease. So how could the National Cancer Institute of the United States be so profoundly wrong in their understanding of what cancer is? So they give grants to the top hospitals to study cancer, and most of that stuff is hunting for gene targets. You know, you even hear it advertised on TV at night. Oh, this patient has an EGFR receptor, the epidermal growth factor receptor, and we're going to use this special immunotherapy. What the hell is that? They're fermenters, for crying out loud. Yeah. The tumors are fermenting. You want to kill them, you take away their fermentable fuels. If you target the EGFR receptor, yeah, you'll kill a few cancer cells. But here's the problem. The EGFR receptor is on some of our normal cells, and all of a sudden you start blowing out somebody's liver and kidneys as a result of trying to kill their tumor cells. Yeah. So you run the risk of what we call hyperprogressive disease. We don't want it. Metabolic therapy eliminates all that kind of stuff.
And this could just be speculative, Tom, but it sounds like you're talking about an intervention that requires a nutrition, maybe exercise, lifestyle interventions, and maybe the occasional pharmaceutical intervention at lower dose. Whereas it sounds like the genetic approach is mostly, pharmaceuticals, immunotherapies, things that are going to be a little bit more medically inclined. So there could be some attachment there to, that may perhaps being one of the motivating factors. They can drive more research.
Well, yeah, but what are the research they're driving? More of the same. We have over 1,600 people a day dying from cancer. It gets worse every year. Breast cancer has replaced heart disease, #1 killer of women. So you start to ask yourself. Now, I'm not saying we throw out all the different tools that we have available to us. I just think chemotherapy could be completely reevaluated as to the dosage and timing of which are giving these patients. Yeah. Radiation therapy could be strategic when used in the appropriate way. The tumor cells seem to become more susceptible to radiation therapy. I except the brain. I would say never. The human brain should never, under any condition, be irradiated, period. In fact, we published big papers showing how most of the GBM patients are dying as the result of the standard of care itself, as much as it is for the tumor. And that has to stop. That's one of the things that really has to stop. But you use immunotherapies, for example. They target cells that have a similar kind of epitope on their surface. So if we use metabolic therapy to pare down the majority of the tumor, remove the blood vessels, reduce the inflammation, the surviving cells after that treatment may in fact all have a common epitope because they were able to still hang on despite all of these treatments. Now an immunotherapy could come in as the final step in eliminating the final tumor cell. Again, you don't do it at the beginning. You do it after you've shrunken this thing down and make it much more manageable. Even surgery is far more effective if you have a small circumscribed mass than if you have this big, angry, ugly thing. Everything is there. It's just that you need to do it in the right context, because once you understand the biology of the problem, like we do, then a lot of these things could be used in a much greater, with a greater efficacy. Yeah. So again, we know what we need to do. We have all the tools necessary. We just have to rearrange the deck.
Tom, do you think a ketogenic diet should be used prophylactically to help people, maybe on like a yearly basis or a biannual basis?
I don't know what to say about that. Like a lot of people do water-only fat. Anything you can bring your GKI down to 2.0 or below is going to be highly therapeutic.
Just in general for everybody. So not someone, yeah.
Oh yeah. A lot of these health gurus are out there to get their GKIs down. How long would you want to do that? That's another question.
Right.
Water-only fasting will do it, but it's hard. I did it. It's really.
How long did it take you to get into that state?
Well, I went 3 days and I still didn't get into the full state. But I tell you what's easier is if you go for like 10 or 12 days on zero carbohydrate, just whatever you eat, have very, very extremely low carbs, low glycemic. The jump then to water-only fasting becomes much less stressful.
Yeah.
The brain is addicted. All of our brains are addicted to glucose.
Yeah.
And boy, it's to try to break that addiction is just as can be just as uncomfortable as breaking an addiction to nicotine, to alcohol, to any kind of a drug. So again, we're addicted, and we're trying to remove the addiction. But we evolved as a species that never was addicted to glucose.
Sure.
So we also have to recognize that's our natural state, is unaddicted to glucose.
Or maybe we were addicted, we just didn't have access to it in such.
Well, we have it. That's why. Yeah, but that's why we evolved to love sweets, because they never were part of the natural environment. Honey, okay, well, you have to risk your face getting stung 10 times by bees just to get the sweet from the honey, or fruits during their ripe season. So, but these were seasonal things. They weren't year-round things. Now we have year-round highly processed carbohydrates all the time in the diet, putting us at risk for all kinds of things.
Tom, where do you sit on supplemental ketones?
Dom is a big guy on supplemental ketones. I think that if your blood sugar is not reduced, you're going to piss out the ketones very quickly. So you really need to lower your blood sugar to have supplemental ketones provide a more powerful effect. So people can't go out and say, okay, I'm going to take this ice cream cone or this burrito or whatever the hell I'm going to eat, and to make it, I'm going to take supplemental ketones. No. That's not. I think we can use supplement. Once the patient is in therapeutic ketosis, supplemental ketones can force higher, can push could potentially lower glucose more, as Dom showed, and elevate ketones more. So again, it puts more pressure on tumors. So don't forget, all of my research is focusing on killing cancer cells without toxicity. That's our laser focus. How do we kill cancer? How many different ways can we kill tumor cells without causing toxicity? And if supplemental ketones can push these cancer cells over the brink a little bit faster, we're all for it. And we have some experiments that we're planning to do, adding them to the diet drug cocktail.
I think I first heard you on Peter Attia's in 2018. What has changed in your approach or your belief system in the last 5 years?
Well, I've collected more hard evidence to support what I'm saying, and we've published more case reports of humans that have engaged in this stage 4 breast cancers, brain cancer, liver cancer. So I'm working with physicians where we're using metabolic therapy to treat humans. We're also learned, as I said, we developed a really good model for pediatric high-grade glioma, and we in very young mice, and we're testing diet drug cocktails, and we're absolutely convinced. And we were shocked to see how powerful ketogenic diets were with different kinds of drugs that were considered toxic when used alone. So I've become even more certain that what I'm saying is correct, mainly because of the research that we have done and the outcomes that we have seen.
When you see diet drug cocktails, are you referring to cancer drugs specifically, or actually like things known to decrease body weight and blood sugar?
No, for cancer specifically. Okay. I know a lot of the guys in the CrossFit world, And those guys are always super healthy, and they're always doing all these kinds of things. I think it's great to prevent cancer if you know that you can stay in these states for cancer prevention. But most people in the country that have cancer, they have cancer. They want to know what they can do now. That yes, they say, oh yes, I know I shouldn't have been overweight. Yes, I know I should have smoked. Yes, I know I should have had more exercise. Yeah, blah blah blah. But now I have cancer. What are you going to do for me? And as I said, when you have a 1,600 people over, it's almost now 1,700 people a day dying from cancer. And the ones that survive, don't forget we have 1,000,005 new cases diagnosed. And we have a lot of cancer survivors from standards of care. But man, a lot of them are beat up severely from the massive radiation and poisonous chemicals. And their digestion is screwed up. Their mental health is screwed up. Their hormonal balances are screwed up. Their gut is screwed up as the result of being treated inappropriately with very toxic procedures. So again, the goal here is to manage the disease effectively without having those horrible adverse consequences of the current situation. And I know for a fact, I know absolutely for a fact that this will be the standard of care at some point in the future.
Yeah.
But there are large, resistance to this on all. But they don't. It's not a blowback. It's just they don't ignore it. They just don't discuss it. Or they'll brush it off. Like a lot of many people will say, "Oh, it has to be repeated." It's been repeated hundreds and hundreds of times. Don't you read the literature? That argument doesn't hold, has to be repeated. If it were so important, I would have learned about it. Well, why didn't you learn about it in medical school? You should have learned about it there. No, they're talking about cancer as a genetic disease, not a metabolic disease. So you can go right through the list of things that are in the way, the walls that prevent metabolic therapy from becoming the standard of care.
Do you have a specific ratio of macronutrients that you advocate for people getting into a ketogenic state to get into this specific ratio?
It's hard. As I said, I've seen people with vegans do it. I've seen carnivores do it. I've seen Mediterranean guys do it. But, if vegans have trouble, they might want to do carnivore. Carnivore has trouble, they might want to do vegan. But usually plants, it's harder to get into the zone with plants from my experience, because plants have more carbs than meat. Don't forget we evolved as omnivores, so we can we are very flexible in our diets. Also, you have to deal with cultural issues, religious and cultural issues on diets. But if you're really concerned, stop eating completely. Just do water-only fasting. If you're worried about eating this or that, because water-only fasting will bring you into a state of therapeutic ketosis, no question about it. But then you'd want to maintain that, and then you have to decide what you can and cannot eat in order to maintain the GKI ratio.
Tom, is there anything that I know there's an enormous amount of stuff that we could discuss, but is there anything that's super important that we haven't discussed that the listeners should know about your research and what you're currently studying?
Well, as I said, right now we're perfecting dosage, timing, and scheduling. And that's considered unsexy science. What's the mechanism? And they always want to know what I would rather say, what's the outcome? Let's look at, do you have something that's really effective? Yeah, we do. Okay, how can we perfect it? How do we make it even better than it is? And again, that comes to dosage, timing, and scheduling. So, and we're learning some of these repurposed drugs, some of these kinds of things that are, we're just trying to find the best way that we can maintain highest quality of life, progression-free survival, and improved overall survival. And the only thing I can say that we've is a dog with mast cell tumor on his face, and I published that paper in Frontiers in Nutrition, and that dog at 7 years old developed a mast cell tumor on the lip, which grew. Interestingly enough, the woman was told that the dog should have radiation, or suggested, and she didn't want it, the pet owner, and she put the dog on a vegan diet, a raw vegetable and steamed fish diet and the tumor grew faster. So it even got bigger. And then she heard what we were saying, and she got the raw chicken with the bone in it, some fish oil, raw egg, cut the dog's calories by 40%. And within 4 or 5 months, this tumor disappeared completely, and followed this dog until it died at 15 and a half years. It was a pit bull, and they generally don't live more than 14 years. Well, this dog lived to be 15 years. The cancer never came back. So the dog died from heart failure. So when you say that's the real only, I don't know, that's the way I think so you're a young guy, God forbid you get cancer, you do metabolic therapy and you die at 97 from heart failure, but not the cancer never returned. You can say on your deathbed that I was from cancer.
Yeah.
But it always can, because people fear that it always could come back at some point.
Right.
So if it never comes back, you were.
Is there somewhere that listeners can actually access that information once you publish it? Do you have a specific?
Yeah, that's an important point, because some people say, well, where's the evidence? I published it. Okay, so you just put my name into Google and say publications, and all the papers will pop up.
Yeah.
And people are free to read the details of what I'm saying, the actual experimental design, and all of the things that we do. And the support, most of our support comes from private foundations and philanthropy. There are folks that give us money because they know we're on the right path to the resolution of cancer, making it a disease that's quite manageable, and they feel they'd like to be part of that. So there are good people out there that say, listen, this is where it's action. Now, there are a lot of folks, I don't say a lot, but there are some folks that are entrepreneurs, and they're trying to figure out how to make money on this whole system, which is only natural, because the business of America is business. And I'm not opposed to anybody who can figure out how to make money on this metabolic therapy. But right now, we have seen a lot of them scratching their heads trying to figure out how can we make a lot of money on diet drug of repurposed drug. None of these things are you have to patent. People make a lot of money on patented things, and how do you patent diet drug therapies where you just kind of put them all together? It's kind of hard, because it's very hard to protect something like this, and also the patient themselves become a prime participant in the management. You see, I'm not into that. I have a great job at Boston College as a professor. If someone else would like to develop a clinic or set up clinics to do this for patients, then my job is to prove that it works. I get pleasure out of seeing people who are walking the planet who should have been dead, telling me they feel great, they look great. That's rewarding enough for me.
Yeah.
And to know, more importantly, to know that the science behind what I'm saying can account for the outcome of the procedures. That's what the most exciting thing is. Because once you understand the biology and biochemistry, then you know what you need to do to manage this disorder without toxicity. And when you do that, you start to see the outcomes that would be predicted based on the science.
So with respect to dosage and duration, that will be posted just as a research study, and we'll be able to find that on Google.
Yeah, well, doses, timing, and scheduling are still in the process. Our big protocol will be dealing with that. And again, the physician will now have to become knowledgeable about the metabolism of their patients to know which dosage, timing, and scheduling might work best for them. So again, it's not like one shoe fits all. Now you really need to be a physician. You need to practice what you're doing. You really need to now to know what your patient's metabolism is. You need to know the blood work. You need to know these kinds of things. And then you make a decision. You work with a team of people, nutrition, dietitians, oncologists that understand the mechanism behind what they're doing. So again, there's going to be a lot of retraining. But a lot of these guys could do it right away if they just understood the concepts. And then the other situation is, will the system allow them to do this? So the standard of care it should never have been written in granite, but it seems to have been written in granite. It's very hard to overturn these procedures, especially for brain cancer, which is killing the majority of people that have glioblastoma. The treatment itself, what you're doing to these poor folks. I've published papers after paper after paper showing exactly how radiation, steroids, and the temozolomide are actually killing the patients. And like Pablo didn't do any of that. He's doing fine. And then they say, oh, no, he's a fluke. He's only one of a kind. Well, how many other flukes would we have if we did what Pablo did? God forbid we do, because can you imagine if we get a large number of people living 9 years with a diagnosed glioblastoma? This would overturn a whole way of doing things right now. But I don't care. What I need to do is know how many people we can keep alive with a quality of life and they feel good about themselves. That's the goal. And it doesn't make any difference if it's breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer, bladder cancer. It doesn't make any difference. We want to see people surviving longer than they should have ever been predicted to survive.
I appreciate your passion so much. It's so clear to me you found what your calling is in life, and it shows. And I'm so grateful for you making the time and ultimately continue to do what you do, supporting us. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to benefit from this podcast. So Tom Seyfried, thank you so much for making the time.
And remember, Travis Christofferson, who wrote the book Tripping Over the Truth, Rise of the Metabolic Approach to Cancer. His foundation Foundation for Metabolic Therapy supports our work. Okay. So if anybody would like to contribute to our research and philanthropy, every paper that we publish, you'll look at the people who have supported us, and we name them. So we put them in the name. We put their names on the acknowledgement section of who supported the work, and that tells them that their support is actually being seen in peer-reviewed publications.
Yeah, we all know someone who has cancer or will get cancer, and I'm sure that's that information will be well received and hopefully well handled. Tom, thank you for making the time. Massively appreciated, my friend.
Okay, take it easy, Ben. Thank you very much.